Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jane Miller.
Hello, everybody. We're going to get started here this afternoon. I want to welcome everybody to our Fall 2020 Career Week that is being presented by Business and Tourism Department here at Mount St. Vincent University. Career Week consists of a series of panels with industry professionals that cover topics such as career paths, how to get a job upon graduation, career advancement, and it also gives Mount students an opportunity to learn from industry professionals that are working in this sector today. My name is Nicholas Diehl, and I am an assistant professor here in the Department of Business and Tourism, and I have the awesome privilege of moderating this wonderful dialogue that we're going to have here this afternoon. I want to get started by first thanking everybody who has joined us, students, and especially want to give a big thanks to our panelists. They are extraordinary. They are professionals in their field, and we are excited to have them, and we're privileged. So thank you, everybody, for taking time to be with us. And joining us today, we have Dr. Anika Voltan, who is the Executive Director of Community Sector Council of Nova Scotia. We have Paula Goulding, who is the Director of Administration for Feed Nova Scotia. We have Vanessa Nasrallah, who is the Senior Community and Funds Development Manager at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada. We have Matthew Ritchie, who is Community Integration Coordinator, the YMCA Immigrant Services Team. And we have Dr. Kristen Williams, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Junior Achievement Nova Scotia. Welcome, panelists. Welcome, everybody. Let's start our conversation here this afternoon. And I will turn this over to Annika first, and I will ask each panelist this question, and here it is. Could you briefly describe to all of us here the organization that you work for, the position that you have in your organization, and the type of work in the community sector that you're currently involved in?
Sure. Thank you, Nick. So hi, everyone. My name is Annika again, and I'm actually just 2 weeks into the current role that I hold, and that's as the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Community Sector Council. And this is an organization that is really set up to be a voice for the sector. So we do advocacy and awareness building work about the nonprofit and voluntary organizations and social enterprises across the province. We're also focused on doing a lot of network building work for connecting those organizations and capacity building, so learning and training opportunities. And before 2 weeks ago, I was the executive director of an organization called Inspiring Communities, which is a really great kind of social innovation and community development organization that you might want to check out online as well. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Annika. Welcome to the panel. We're happy to have you. I'm going to turn to Paula. Paula, can you briefly describe to us the organization that you are working with, the position that you hold, and the type of work that you have been involved in the community sector to present day?
Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to participate. I work for Feed Nova Scotia. I hold the role of Director of Administration. So I look after the support team, the IT team, finance people, resources, human resources, volunteer services, and admin support. I also work closely with our executive director and our board of directors in the areas of board governance and our fiduciary responsibilities. Feed Nova Scotia, our mission is to increase food security through food distribution, education, and collaboration. We have 140 member agencies, which consists of food banks, meal programs, and shelters across Nova Scotia, and we deliver food and other resources to them across the province on a regular basis, and we support about 45,000 individuals annually, and we distributed last year, I think, about 2 million kilograms of food.
Wow, thank you so much, Paula. Incredible work I know that you do in your organization. So welcome to our panel this afternoon. Vanessa, please talk to us. Tell us a little bit about your organization, the work that you do, and all the exciting things that you're involved in the community sector.
Cool. Yeah, so I work with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada. We're the largest voluntary health organization that focuses on blood cancer. We are in the States and in Canada. There are chapters throughout all of Canada for our organization. So I'm the Senior and Community Fund Development Manager, which is a very long title, a little excessive, but basically what it means is I work on a lot of the fundraising. So some people are familiar with the Light the Night Walk. We have a new campaign, which you can see the logo wherever it is. Things are flipped when they're on Zoom. Man, Woman of the Year. So I'm in charge of basically building our revenue to fund our mission in Atlantic Canada, so in all 4 of our provinces. What we focus on for our patients is education, especially right now with everything going on with COVID-19. We focus on support, ensuring that they are getting the support, which we have seen a huge increase in because unfortunately our nurses and doctors can't do what they used to do. They're stretched a little thin. And of course, research. So those are our 3 main pillars that we fund. And yeah, so I kind of do a little bit of it all. That's what we all do in nonprofit, I think.
Excellent, and we're going to talk about that and unpack some of the challenges perhaps that are in this type of environment, if you will, or in this sector. So welcome, Vanessa. We're happy to have you. Matthew, I wanted to turn it to you. So again, what is the work that you do? Who are you working for? And the type of work perhaps that you have done in the community sector?
Thanks, Nick. And thanks, everyone. Happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. My work is with the YMCA of Greater Halifax, Dartmouth. So I work specifically with the YMCA Immigrant Services, and we build healthy communities across different departments with YMCA of Halifax, Dartmouth. And the way that we do that at the YMCA is working with newcomers in my department. So I work with newcomers in crisis. I lead a team of 5 mobile crisis workers who work with newcomers who have arrived in Nova Scotia and are having challenges from police involvement to neighborhood conflict, eviction, really serious matters as they, look to settle in Nova Scotia.
Well, thank you for that, Matthew, and all the incredible work that you are involved in our community. We're privileged to have you join our panel, so thank you. Kristen Williams, could you talk to us about the organization that you are at the helm, that you lead, and the work that it does, and your involvement in the community sector?
So thank you for having me. I've had the pleasure of being on this panel before, and I've always enjoyed the opportunity to hear from other organizations as well as talking to the students, so thank you. I lead Junior Achievement of Nova Scotia. JA is a worldwide organization. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, youth-serving organizations with a specific mandate in education around financial literacy, workplace readiness, and entrepreneurship. My job over my tenure here has really been around stewarding partnerships and key relationships that serve the organization's mission so that we have the capacity to do our critical work. And so that means I get to spend a lot of time with community leaders, business leaders, folks in government, and stewarding some really interesting and strategic projects. I'm lucky enough to have a COO, which means that some of the day-to-day stuff I'm not quite as in touch with as I used to be. But it also means that I can do some things that help Jay move forward in kind of a different direction, and that's been my focus through COVID. And I have something in common with Annika. I spent 6 years on the board of the Community Sector Council and 2 years before that on the steering committee, very devoted to the sector at large, and I currently serve on the board of the Discovery Center. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Kristen. And I want to let our students know, and those who are participating on the panel here, in terms of the audience, that we have brought together, as you can see, incredible leaders in our community that give you a sample as to how wide and how much depth you can bring into the nonprofit world. And so we're excited about that and to showcase that to you over the next 70 or so minutes. So I'm going to start here with Paula. Paula, this is a question that often comes up with this type of work. Working in the community, nonprofit, it's very different from the normative sense of business studies, right? So, capitalist imperative. And oftentimes people who come to work in the community sector find it's discovered work, or it's perhaps they've made a calling out of it. So I wanted you to, if you can, share with us how you came to work in the community sector, and how was your education and your life experience led you to your current position?
Thanks, Nick. It was a really interesting question, so thank you for that. It gave me some time to reflect on my own career, which I don't often do. I think I started out as a young person volunteering. I think volunteering has always been part of my family, and that just kind of continued, and I always felt myself wherever I happened to be volunteering in some way, shape, or form, whether it would be you know, from a sports club or service club or other nonprofits or charity. There was always something from a family perspective that had. With Feed Nova Scotia, it was Metro Food Bank Society at the time, about 18 years ago. It was kind of a matter of right place, right time. I was looking for a part-time temporary position while a family member was not well. And I came on and I ended up, I just didn't leave. I stayed there, and here we are 18 years later. I didn't really know a whole lot about the organization at the time, but I grew to love it, and I grew to love its mission and the people and what it does in the community. If I were to reflect back on my career, I think early in my career, I didn't follow a kind of a traditional path where I went, you know, graduate from high school, post-secondary education. I did a little bit of everything. And while early in the days of my career, I always thought of it as more of a negative, that I moved around, I did a lot of different things, tried different things. Now, when I look back on that history, I'm actually quite proud of that. And I think it's really lent itself to a lot of the skills that I bring to the table today. I've been able to experience a lot of different things. And I think it's actually been an asset to me in my experience now. Being curious is really important, wanting to learn new skills, have different experiences. In my education journey, I've always been a proponent of continuing to learn, whether to be in a formal type of learning or informal. Most recently, I'll give the Mount a bit of a shout out. I completed the Mount's Nonprofit Leadership Certificate program. We graduated from that program, where I met a lot of extremely exceptional people from all different walks of life, different generations and sectors, and had some really great moments. I learned a lot about myself personally and academically. It was a challenge at times, but then it was really celebratory at times as well. And that program in itself led to my ability to bring more back to my organization, and then ultimately resulted in a promotion to a director role in the last year. So that's kind of where my evolution came to be.
Wow, Paula, thank you for that, and thank you for highlighting that the experiences that we have in our life can lead to opportunities. And as well, for students who are joining us in the nonprofit leadership community sector program here at the Mount, Paula is a testament of this particular program and what could lie ahead of you for opportunities. So Paula, thank you for that shout out. Vanessa, talk to us, how did you come to work in the community sector? And then perhaps it was passive education and experience. What doors led you to the position that you hold right now in the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society?
Yeah, so I always say that my job found me. I lost my brother to a very rare form of leukemia and lymphoma in 2013. And like Paula, I had volunteered a lot in my life growing up. So, and that's actually how the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society found me. I was doing Light the Night myself. I was helping out in the office. And then somebody from our Quebec chapter said, would you ever consider doing this as a job? And to be quite honest, no one had ever told me that you could work in nonprofit in my life. So that was really interesting to me. And after going through losing my brother, my only sibling, I was kind of in a stage of my life where I thought, why not? Which I think is where we're all at this year. Might as well try anything. And I just fell in love with it. I don't know that I could do anything else. I think the work that we do is so rewarding, and you get paid in love, and that's, I don't know if you can beat that. So yeah, that's how I came to be at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. So I've been here from 2013 to 2015. I was with Brigadoon for 2 years. Brigadoon's an amazing organization. And then I came back to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society because it is I think where my heart lies. I am a 2-time Mount grad, which I'm very proud of. So I did the undergraduate communications program, and then I just finished my master's in PR this year. And I think what that education has done for me, I'm a pretty animated person, as you can tell, but that has also come from doing things like public speaking courses at the Mount, and that has come from learning how to be critical of things and how to, conduct myself in a room and all of that kind of stuff. So I credit a lot to what I've learned from the professors at the Mount. It's a very warm place to be, and I think you can take that warmth everywhere with you.
Thank you, Vanessa. And for full disclosure, Vanessa and I were peers in our undergrad experience not too long ago. I don't want to say many years because that would make us feel old, so we won't say that, but thank you, Vanessa, for that. And what I really enjoyed about your sharing your story is that this job here, your position, your work found you. That's a really cool, innovative way of thinking about the work that we do in the community. Matthew, talk to us the story about how you come to work in the community sector, and with it, perhaps the pathways that education and life experience directed to your current position and success.
Yes, thanks, Nick. I came to the YMCA multiple times as well, Vanessa. So I started working in 2008 in the schools, and then I've recently come back to the YMCA Immigrant Services to support newcomers again. My education career and background was in the arts. So I studied arts at university, and then like Paula, I worked in many different organizations and learned about people skills, like how to interact, how to, be professional in different settings, in government and in nonprofit. And then my personal experience brought me to the Y Immigrant Services. I lived in Czech Republic, in Prague for a number of years, and that experience of being in a place where I didn't speak the language, where I didn't have the advantages of social and family networks was really profound for me. So then coming back to Montreal and then eventually back to Nova Scotia, I really wanted to support newcomers who are, settling in Canada and specifically Nova Scotia, where I'm from. So in terms of that experience and my position, I grew into more senior roles and leading people through professional development. So whenever I work at an organization, I communicate with the leadership team that I want to grow. I want to, I'm loyal to organizations and I want to learn. So I find that internal learning within organizations is where I've had the most learning and opportunity for career growth.
Thank you, Matthew. In the sense that I'm getting already around this digital discussion here is that the work that we do in the community sector, it follows us and there's no one straight path. And so that's pretty exciting. All the experiences you've had that brought you to your current success. So thank you. Kristin, could you talk to us about the story and the experience of working in the community sector and how perhaps your pathway to education and experience has led you and perhaps even made you a greater leader in the community in your current position?
I actually had a very similar upbringing, it sounds like, that Paula did. I had a service-oriented family and volunteers starting very, very young, and always thought that was just part of what we do in life. So I've come by that pretty honestly. But not unlike some of my other colleagues here, my transition into the nonprofit sector was very personal. So it wasn't a byproduct of my education so much as it was a byproduct of my home life. I actually, when I became a mother, I started to think very seriously about the kind of world we live in and the kind of world I wanted my children to inherit. And I thought about what kind of role model I wanted to be to them. And I left a pretty awesome job from a child's perspective. I used to lead public relations and communications at Canada's Wonderland. So you can imagine that would have made me a pretty popular mom as well. But after spending 12 years there, I really felt it was time to make a change. And at that time, I was living in Ontario, and I started working at the Ontario SPCA, so the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And it was a really interesting opportunity for me to deploy the skills I'd learned, in the for-profit sector, in the nonprofit sector. And what I found immediately was it was just so much more rewarding. I had, none of the same resources, none of the same budgets, but a lot of latitude to be creative and to be develop myself personally, and I've never looked back. I was recruited to come out and lead the Nova Scotia SPCA, and then eventually made my transition to junior achievement. So it really was quite a personal shift for me. And volunteerism, I do really believe, is a very vital conduit to entering the nonprofit sector. And for the many students that I've spoken to over the years about working in the sector, that's the first thing that I recommend they do. Obviously, we are an overeducated sector, and I'm sure Annika can speak to some of those metrics with respect to our labor market, but we are an overeducated sector. So your education is an important part of becoming qualified in the sector, but if you're like me and you're looking at resumes, one of the first things I look for is where are they volunteering? What are people doing? How are they contributing to society? And it's also a fantastic way for you to develop leadership skills and manage projects top to bottom. So it's a great developmental opportunity as well.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much. Annika, the story of how you're involved in the community sector and the many paths through education, through experience that has led you to your current and very new role as Executive Director of the Community Council of Nova Scotia.
I like that you're prefacing by assuming that I did have a windy road, because like others, I definitely did. I grew up in Nova Scotia and have moved away and come back many times. I think I'm here for good now, but I usually start this by saying that my mom is an academic and my dad's an entrepreneur, and that kind of encompasses what I embody. So my education is all in business. I now have 3 business degrees, but I first did my undergrad, and out of that I went and sold photocopiers over the phone for Xerox in the call center in Burnside, and I realized very quickly that was not the world for me, and really questioned this kind of profit above all else, and the just perpetual growth model that's inherent to capitalism. And so it wasn't long after that I went back to school again, and I had the privilege of being able to almost make my own MBA. And so that's where I was exposed to things like corporate social responsibility and eco-efficiency in business, and the role of public policy in helping change happen. And that was in 2006, and social enterprise and some of these other kind of more emergent concepts weren't really that present at the business school I was at. And had they been, I might have taken a different path at that point. But I ended up working with the federal government for a while, and more on climate change and environmental policy, and with the university sector in Ontario as well. So when I came back here, I had entrepreneurial ideas, but I ended up working in the provincial government for a while. And I think it was really, and I should add too, at that time, I started a PhD. So Kristen and Nick and I have all been in the same program. And that's a program that is very much focused on a critical lens on management. And so that really spoke to me, and I did a lot of my work around the power of networks for creating social change and social enterprise. And so it was kind of in the midst of working for doing that degree when I reconnected with some folks from the province about this idea that first started as a project of doing community development work across the province. And that evolved into that organization I mentioned called Inspiring Communities. So I very much, I think I all that to say, I got into the sector by just being very, interested and vocal about my belief that we can do so much more through this lens of kind of social innovation and networks, and really pushing the limits of, bringing that kind of entrepreneurial and strategic lens to nonprofit organizations in the province. So And then that one led to the next one, and here I am. So thanks for the question.
No, thank you, Annika. And again, I'll highlight the responses that we're getting here for students to pay attention to this, that the work here, it's discovered, and one opportunity leads to another, and that we're highly experienced and educated, and we bring our whole selves to work. And so I appreciate all these sentiments here. Vanessa, I'm going to get you started on this question here. And I want to get a sense, so we're going to think globally here for a second. From your observation, what would you say is the biggest challenge in nonprofit community sector at this particular moment, considering everything that has happened in 2020? What would you say the biggest challenges for our sector?
That's a great question. I mean, I can only speak to what I know personally, so I think we could probably all answer this question in our own way. For me, I think, especially in this province, we have an amazing amount of really great causes, and you know, they're all amazing. So luckily, I think, you know, we're doing okay so far with everything going on, but we had to fight hard before for the funding we get. We have to fight even harder now. And I think the other thing that I am paying very close attention to for our patients is how much they're going to need us and how much more they're going to need us, because there's not going to be the same funding from the government that there once was for certain things. So for instance, for us this year, we were very, very concerned about being able to fund our researchers. And they're not getting the money that they need from the government because they have to work on COVID-19 related research. So that means that we have to make up what they're not getting elsewhere. And that's a scary thought. What that means is if someone's not in their lab, well, you know, 5-10 years down the road, if a cancer researcher's not in their lab for 1 to 2 years, that's quite scary actually. So it's trying to recover from this as quickly as we can and make sure that we are all still here when people need us, regardless of the organization, because we're all needed. And I think that's why we're a strong group in Atlantic Canada. That's why our sector is so big and why it is so important. And I think it's why we all do well. So I guess recovery is what I'm most concerned about. What's that going to do to all of us long term? And nobody knows the answer to that.
Vanessa, you raise an excellent point, and we're constantly looking at the economic conditions. And one of the follies that we often fall prey to is the community sector is totally different from business or capitalist imperative and all those narratives. However, they're actually quite close. And you said, so there's an economic disruption, and now that has trickle-down implications for our sector. And so thank you for highlighting that. Very important, and I would totally agree with what you're saying about that. Funding is key, especially in this sector. Matthew, the same question to you. Your observation, looking at it from an outside perspective perhaps, what would you say the biggest challenge is in the community/nonprofit sector at this moment in time?
I would say COVID-19, and in connection with that, the sustainability of organizations, in terms of funding models and service models. We're lucky at the YMCA. We're deemed, the crisis team's deemed an essential service, and we've been back in the office at the YMCA serving clients in person since July. But with COVID-19 restrictions, a lot of the partners that we work with in the nonprofit sector, haven't had that ability to do in-person programs and services. And that's a huge challenge, about how to connect with clients and community online when not everyone has access to technology or an interest in connecting with people online, for the services. It's a human service, and connection with people in our sector is often really important. So I think that's the big challenge right now. And I'm feeling very fortunate that Nova Scotia has lower case numbers, and we are currently able to work in person.
Excellent. And you raise the very interesting topic about how the work that we do can be labeled as essential, right? That we're so grateful and happy that the first responders and our medical community is labeled that, but the work that we do, that we're involved in, can also likewise be critical to the social fabric of our communities and the stakeholders that we engage. So thank you for highlighting that. That's very important. Kristin, talk to us your assessment of the biggest challenges that our community sector, nonprofit leadership is facing at this moment.
I certainly agree with what's been said. The last 8 months have been very hard on our sector. And I would come at it from perhaps a different vantage point to talk about capacity. So when I was doing training in the sector, there was not a single organization within our sector that I spoke to that said that they were meeting the needs of their constituent group, that they, had the relative capacity to meet those needs. So, and that was, not in a COVID reality. I know, for instance, for us, we are waitlisting programs. Students are not always able to access our programs because we don't have perhaps the necessary funds or volunteer capacity to deliver to the extent we would like to. And of course, that's been significantly reduced. To give you some perspective, we would typically reach anywhere between 15 to 18,000 students a year, certainly 100% of grade 9 students with a program that would encourage them to stay in school, learn about budgeting, learning basic financial literacy skills and the benefits of education. It was a career-linked program, meaning that education was not providing those outcomes, but we were providing those outcomes. It was part of our relationship. And now we are an organization that is half the size we were pre-COVID. So that just exacerbates that completely. And Jay's mission worldwide is actually one of poverty relief and poverty alleviation, because it is about labor attachment, and it is about preparing young people to function in a global society and within an economy. So we're not deemed essential right now, which is perhaps understandable, but on the other side of this, when it comes to building back up the economy, we're invested in the youth that are going to be facing that reality, and we're trying to prepare them for that reality, and it's a very uncertain one. So yes, thank you for the question. I think people don't quite understand how significant our organizations have been touched by this. Many of us don't receive reliable core funding year to year. We start at zero every year. There's no one who's got our backs other than the relationships we rely on, and they've all been affected significantly.
That's fantastic, Kristin. If I can sort of sift through the amazing job you just did there, I think sustainability here is key, right? So taking or exercising concern that in the future, that we can not only make up the gap, but we can continue. And in your case, you're talking about financial literacy and sort of supplementing, if you will, in the education system. And if that's missing because of this pandemic, where do we make up the gap? And so I think being concerned for the long term, much as we are for financial, and being connected in the social implications of COVID are pretty important. We had a question, we had somebody, Betty Watson-Borg, I wanted to get to your hand. You raised your hand, and we'll ask you to turn on your mic and to contribute or to ask that question that you had raised your hand for. Betty?
Nick, she accidentally raised her hand. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We go with the flow here on this panel. It's a discussion. Annika, talk to us about your observation of the moment that we're in and the biggest challenge that you see the community sector faces.
Sure, and I certainly agree with everything that's been said, and you're right that I'm not surprised at all to hear that sustainability is a theme. Many of or I guess most of the nonprofits and voluntary organizations would rely on government grants and donations from corporate entities, as well as events that they're running that they haven't been able to hold in person. So there's revenue gaps this year in particular from a multitude of places, and it's a trickle-down effect too in terms of what's happening in the broader economy. And I think there's also another underlying funding issue that Kristin was touching on. that is not related to COVID at all. And that's the fact that the community sector really does, as I mentioned, rely a lot on grants, and those grants could be, just for continuing regular operations or for project-based service delivery. But what happens there is that a lot of the grants are just year to year or even shorter periods of time. And so it becomes really hard to be able to do a lot of strategic planning and foresight. And that also has effects on the ability to be able to recruit and retain staff. So you can imagine if you're out looking for work, a lot of the jobs that you're going to see are like 6-month, 1 year, 2-year term kinds of opportunities. And we'll come back to that later, I think, in terms of what that means from a job hunt perspective, because it's not all negative. But I think the other thing I just want to say, because of all of these things that are affecting the sector, I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemy in a way, in the sense that I really think that there's a scarcity mindset that can lead to competition in the sector, and this sense that we don't have enough to go around. So we have to really hold tight to what we have and make sure that we keep our secrets so that, we don't risk losing the funding that we have, because we already have so little. And so a big message that I carry and will continue to carry as I move into my work with the Community Sector Council is that we really need to overcome that viewpoint, and we need to take more of a lens of abundance and collaboration and think seriously about where are there opportunities for reorganizing the sector, whether that be, things like mergers or shared back-end services or shared space, or there's a new thing called cluster employment that maybe I'll come back to later, of like, how can we have full-time staff that are across organizations so that they get a full-time role with benefits. And I could go on, but I do think that some of it is up to us to say, bring that entrepreneurial lens and that kind of strategic view to think about how we could do better.
Excellent, Annika, and there was some positive responses here of people applauding you, and that we could build back in a better and more sustainable way after this moment of challenge. So thank you for that. Thank you for participating, everybody, on that response there. Paula, I'll wrap up this question here to you. Your observation of the biggest challenge that our community sector faces at this present moment.
I would echo everything that everyone else has said, and and to what Annika was saying there earlier too. We in the food banking world, lots of conversation and thoughts around, is that model antiquated? Are we doing the right services? Are we providing the right support for people who need us? Do we have too many here, not enough here? Where are those food deserts? Like, there's lots of things happening in that, and lots of conversation, and sharing some of those resources and amalgamating may be the right step and move forward. So outside of what everyone else has already talked about, I would say the biggest thing right now, as in relation to COVID, because that's the thing on all our radar right now, is also keeping our people whole. There's lots of new things happening as we all react to the new need and increased demand on services and capacity, and really keeping an eye on our people and making sure that they're well looked after, that they have the right supports in place, that mental health and well-being and wholeness around well-being is a challenge. We've back, I don't want to age myself, but I'm 50. So back when I was growing up, early days, it was really about keeping home life at home, work life at work. And I'm a firm believer that, we're whole entities and we're whole people, and we can't do that. That is not the way to move forward. And we need to really keep an eye on our people as well.
Thank you, Paul, for highlighting that very important aspect of our sector and the difference perhaps that can be made between us and in other forms of organizing, that it's for a more human economy and not looking at people as human resources. And so there's a little bit more feel to the work that we do, perhaps, that could be not said in other aspects. So thank you for that. Matthew, I'm gonna ask you this. So we've talked very high level, our observation of the challenges that are very real to our sector, and continuing on that theme. So we've raised issues like COVID-19, the pandemic and all the implications that it has had economically, mental health. There's also been tremendous political instability, cultural tensions and divides, social injustice. So just on this theme, and you can speak to anything beyond this, but what would you say the most critical changes that we must make to face the future in our industry, considering all that is happening now? What are the critical changes that we must make to face the future more effectively in the community sector?
I can speak to my direct role and my experience, but I can also, I think, speak to what Anika was mentioning about inspiring communities. I think the link between government and nonprofit needs to be strengthened. I think historically they've been quite separate to say, okay, well, government's over here doing this service and nonprofit does this, either through a range of funding models, sometimes government funding, but the collaboration between government and nonprofit, I think, is a critical change that needs to happen. And in my work, that those collaborations can be with Halifax Regional Police, it can be with housing, public housing, Housing Nova Scotia. So I work really closely with all of those organizations in terms of how the YMCA and those organizations can support newcomer clients. So that is a critical change, particularly in my sector, but I think what Inspiring Communities is doing that as well, saying, okay, well, government, nonprofit, how are these entities working together in vulnerable communities? And so that I've been participating with Between the Bridges in Dartmouth North, where a lot of newcomers are moving. So that's been really helpful to sort of connect with Take Action Society, all the different nonprofits and community members who are volunteering their time for the betterment of Dartmouth North. So that type of collaboration has been very helpful for me. And I think it's a change that can go across Nova Scotia.
I love that. So seeking collaborative means to a common goal, and seeking out stakeholders that can become allies and working together. I think that's awesome, especially considering the divide that we feel that we face and that we do experience. So thank you. Kristin, same question. The background, dire 2020, but what would you say are the most critical changes that we must make in order for us to face a more brighter future?
Well, I want to pick up a little bit of what Matthew said and a little bit of what Anika said. So I agree with Matthew that collaboration is key, and certainly we at JA have benefited from two kinds of collaboration that I see as being instrumental to our sustainability, but also really enriching the effects of our mission. And one has been with our collaboration with corporate partners. So over the summer months, we needed to completely innovate, change our delivery model. No longer allowed to be in schools, no longer to bring volunteers into the classroom. And we really weren't sure how to go about doing that. And quite frankly, didn't have the budget required to invest in those change costs, because those are real costs, and we didn't have that capacity. We were lucky that Deloitte, who's a partner of ours, agreed to give us 12 weeks of pro bono consultation. They spoke to every one of our stakeholder groups, volunteers, students, parents, guidance counselors, teachers, you name it. They got everybody's buy-in, and they brought everybody along with us in a conversation about what JA would look like post-COVID. And that gave us just tremendous confidence about our approach, and it just gave us resources we didn't have access to, extra capacity, which was fantastic. So I really feel that kind of collaboration is mission critical, not to sound cliche. The other kind of collaboration really happened the last time we encountered crisis, which is when we had job actions a few years ago. And again, we weren't permitted to be in school, but we went where the students were. We partnered with fellow organizations like the Y, like Boys and Girls Club, the McPhee Center, Autism Nova Scotia, Dartmouth Literacy Network. We actually delivered programs in collaboration with other community organizations, and good news that came out of that was that we were reaching kids we hadn't reached before, and having just enormous positive impact. So I think those are 2 points I would raise. And the final one, it speaks to this kind of long-term investing. If I have to start every year from zero, it's very, very, very hard to get any traction on things. And so long-term sustainable funding really would bring huge economies to the mission and to the ways we do things. It's very difficult to work as fast as we do. And trust me, in the nonprofit sector, we do things fast. We can change fast, absolutely. But we shouldn't have to. It's too hard. So I think that that kind of long-term investment in the social safety net of our province is just good business. It's just good. And that there's not a single person anywhere in this country that isn't touched directly or indirectly by the work of this sector, and we should invest in that.
I absolutely agree. And I love that you point out the fact that we have to radically rethink and be adaptive to our environment, and do it in a better way, seeking our stakeholders, seeking them out. So I thought that was really cool. Thank you, Kristen, for sharing that. Annika, same question to you. After everything has gone on, what would you say are the critical changes that we have to make in order to face a future more effectively?
It's a really big question, and I have lots of things I would say. So this might not be the most critical, but it's one of. And I guess I also feel like it's a bit remiss to not say from the previous question in terms of what, like, biggest challenges and what links to what we need to do is that the problems are getting bigger, and that COVID is meaning that the equity divide is greater, and that there are more and more people that fall into the kind of very vulnerable groups. And so not only are there are things that are happening that are having a negative effect on the resources we have to work with, but there's even farther that those resources have to go. And also, as we're seeing the rise of the anti-racism movement, Black Lives Matter, what's happening, in Indigenous communities, and I think just being really focused on how do we effectively make change happen, and where can we most effectively have impact on all of these things that are in the environment right now. And so when I was thinking about this question in advance of the panel, I wrote down first that we need to focus on impact versus the organization. And so I think that so much time and energy is spent on administration, on board relations, on the day-to-day running of an organization, that sometimes we lose the ability to really think about how can we, to my earlier points about restructuring or rethinking, how can we really start to lean in and be more and more intentional on the people that we're trying to serve, and making sure that those voices are central to the solutions that we're coming up with. So yeah, and I have many more things to say, but I'll leave it there.
No, that is great. That reminds me, in my own experience, that this pandemic and this year of struggle and thinking about the future is keeping the main thing at the forefront. What am I doing today that will affect tomorrow or affect somebody else, versus the minutia, if you say the board governance, administration, operations, so on and so forth. So thank you for highlighting that. I think that's important. Paula, question goes to you as well. What do you see as being the most critical changes that have to take place now in order for us to face the future more effectively?
I think I do agree with all the things that everyone else has said to date. In some of my notes, I touched on a couple of those other things. I think diversity and inclusion, we all need to spend more time and more planned time in looking at equity-seeking groups and how their input can help us move through our missions and affect the work that we do. And I think on the other side, there's the board and leadership, organizational courage, especially in times like COVID-19. Take the opportunity. Don't be afraid of taking some risk and do the opposite. For example, when we were affected through COVID, all of a sudden, most of the individuals who would go to a food bank couldn't go to a food bank anymore. So we've kind of flipped it and said, okay, if we take that away, how do we get food to people? Well, we'll have to stand up a delivery program. So we stood up a provincial delivery program, which is kind of opposite of what our mandate is. So it's like, in the moment, you kind of have to be courageous and try to look at what are those other ways, and not be afraid to kind of do something different. So I would say organizational courage and the ability to take some risk when people are frozen because of what's happening around them.
And Paula, to your point, and I'll follow up here with you on this, taking risk, we're limited in our resources, both, you can say human, you can say financial resources. Isn't that difficult? Would you say that's a difficult risk for us to take, of thinking differently, of innovating in this sector? Would you say that that's important to take risks? Yeah.
I mean, organizational risk. I mean, calculated risk is one thing. When you're looking at your risk and managing risk throughout your organization, you're going to be looking at your different areas, but not being afraid to try something different, and not being afraid to collaborate with those partners and do things that are not quite in your wheelhouse, and to do something new and different is really important.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for that, Paula. Vanessa, we're going to wrap up this part of our dialogue here today. Same question. From your vantage point, what do you see as being the critical changes that we must make today in order for us to have a future and to face it more effectively?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. And to touch on something that was spoken about earlier is, and something I'm thankful that our organization have been working on for 2 years prior to everything happening, is I think we really need to be careful with our people. And if our people are okay, we will get through it. But so for our organization, we have a lot of moms who have had to do a lot through all this. And I say moms, there's also dads that have had to do a lot through this as well. And all types of parents, guardians, whatever it is. And I think we've been able to get through this. We just passed Light the Night, we just passed our biggest season, and I was really concerned that people were going to be very burnt out. People are for sure tired, but they're not wanting to walk away, which was the goal. That was the goal, is to get everybody through this, because we don't want people to be walking away. We hired people because of who they are and what they can bring to the table, and we want those minds to stay at our table if they want to. So I think, I love what you said, Paula, organizational courage. That's kind of been the name of the game this year for us. Be creative. This is your time to shine. This is your time to have different ideas. This is your time to speak those and not feel like maybe you can't. It's allowed our mission staff to maybe suggest things to our revenue staff that maybe wouldn't have before, and vice versa. I just got off the phone with someone who works on pharma. That's not my wheelhouse, but I got to be part of that. It's cool in a way to be able to have those opportunities, and for sure sometimes it means taking on more. So we have something called freedom and responsibility. You get your work done however, whenever, wherever it works for you, and as long as it's getting done, don't question it. And I think as long as we keep that, because this is not going to end anytime soon, and I have a feeling that next year for revenue is going to be even harder than this year was, we'll get through this together, I think.
Vanessa, I want to pick up on a theme you just said, daring to share, or daring to care, in taking that risk of doubling down and caring for our people inside, and of course our stakeholders. That's a takeaway for me, so thank you. I'm going to turn this to Kristin. Kristin, I want to ask you this question. We've just talked about the sector, the changes that have to take place, sort of paths to move forward to a future. And I kind of view this conversation as creating some opportunities, hopefully in the minds of our students, to rethink this sector. So what would you say is the best piece of practical advice that you would be willing to share with someone who is interested in working in the community sector?
I've actually been lucky enough to have this conversation with a lot of folks over the years, and it's partly because I work in an organization that has a central role around mentorship, and I've also obviously taught. So I run into people who are at the point in their career where they're like, "How do I do this? How do I get there?" And I would say to your students that that process begins now. It doesn't happen at graduation. It happens now, and it really is through that volunteer opportunity. And I would suggest to you that there's two vantage points to that, because there are many programmatic volunteer opportunities where you can go in and be hands-on with the mission. And that is obviously a great source of new skills and an opportunity to try different missions on. Is this a fit for you? But the other really important one is around governance. And something that has been a bit of a surprise to me over these last 8 months is just how much my own board has stepped up and how much they have been just really visible, present, vocal, and activated, very, very activated. And I think about how amazing that is, because we all know what each other is going through. They're still going through that too, and they're still finding extra time for JA. But board experience brings many benefits. It does bring a lot of leadership opportunity. It gives you opportunity to contribute to the strategic direction of an organization, policy potentially, to network with a broad range of individuals, to represent an organization in the public, and be a friend raiser, if you will. So I really do believe, and I will say it every time somebody asks me this question: volunteer a lot, try a lot of different things on, get to know the sector. That's also how you become visible to the sector. It really is.
Kristen, I love that, because we're going to talk about our next question. We'll be talking about the opportunities that exist in our organizations. So to our panelists, so that's an opportunity to showcase some of the volunteer work and perhaps some career opportunities that may be available. And I think an important point that you just raised there now was that we're not visible until we are in front and on the front line of volunteering, and who knows where opportunities could take us. A colleague of mine here in the department, who is the coordinator for our community leadership program here, nonprofit leadership turning into community leadership, is Dr. Scott Mcmillan, and he has always said this, and I echo these sentiments that Kristin, you made mention earlier, that it's a highly educated field. Everybody is educated, but in addition to our experience in our undergraduate program, what else do we bring to the table? What other skills, what other experiences do we bring? And oftentimes those are discovered by being a little bit selfless and putting ourselves out there to volunteer a couple of hours a week or here and there, and to see how that may benefit not us career-wise, but also benefit the community now in the future. So thank you for highlighting that. That's so important. Annika, the question goes to you as well. What is the best piece of practical advice that you would give to somebody who is thinking about getting involved in the community sector, like to work in it after graduation?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was thinking about this question, I was actually reflecting more from the perspective of how to convince somebody that it is a really great place to work. And I think that might be a reflection of kind of what has been the messaging and just my onboarding process in the last couple of weeks. But there is another reality, is that, nonprofit sector jobs don't always pay the same as what you would get in the private sector. And you're not, like to my earlier point, necessarily going to be offered a permanent position upon start, or even maybe ever. And, benefits can be an issue, and, other things like that. So to flip that in terms of, why I think it's still really a worthwhile pursuit is, we've all talked about how in the nonprofit sector, you end up doing all kinds of different jobs and all kinds of different tasks. And I can't think of a better place to work on really important and meaningful projects and issues, but where you aren't necessarily starting at the bottom, even if you are an entry-level staff member. And so there's all kinds of room to have a say in decision making, have autonomy in your role, and to, you know, like I said, work on projects that you can really have a say in helping them come to life. And so I think bringing that lens and bringing your voice and not being afraid to speak up, because I think we need new perspectives, as I've been saying all along, and really challenging status quo. And so, yeah, I think just being tuned into the potential and being okay with the fact that you're going to need to be adaptive and things might change, and you might need to, you know, be on one project and then move to another project, or maybe between organizations, but that's kind of in line with the fact that we're all in more of a gig economy these days anyway. So yeah, hope that helps.
I love that. That's an excellent piece about having resilience and being flexible. And I think any student could take that on and it would be to their success. Paula, the question is to you. Best piece of advice, practical, that you could give to a student who's listening right now and they're thinking about volunteering, they're thinking about opportunities that may exist in the community sector now and after graduation. What advice would you give to that student?
I think the biggest thing I would say is to be curious. Be curious, make connections, learn about organizations, volunteer, connect, get out there, challenge yourself, but really be curious and be uncomfortable. And find a mentor, somebody that you might connect with that can kind of give you some thoughts and advice or help challenge you in your learning. And just continue to learn, whether it be at an academic level or through your community groups. It's funny because I actually wrote the Community Sector Council of Nova Scotia was one of my places to say, go check them out, go learn, you know, check out some of their programs and just be curious, I think is the big one.
So this panel doesn't know this, but we've had several career panel discussions this week focused on different disciplines in business. And two things that have been raised here, and it's been common across all of these panels, is the power of seeking a mentor or giving back in that regard. And the second one is to be a part of a network, and not just for network's sake. And I know that's a term that's used, and we often push that on students and on new grads, but truly care about the community of people that support you and that you can give back as well. Halifax is a very small business community, and I include the community sector in that. And so being aware of the fact that reciprocity and gratitude could go a long way. So those are really cool connections that are happening throughout each of these panel discussions. So thank you for continuing that. Vanessa, piece of advice you could give to a student that's thinking about getting involved, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, everyone in our office was a volunteer before they were hired. So that is the biggest thing. And I think build a relationship with the people that are in the office. They love to see you. We love to see our volunteers. We love, it's a different face every day that we can count on. And I think that's an important part of it. Be counted on. Don't just, you know, kind of come once in a while. And I feel like I can say that because I'm of the generation that we like to change everything every 2 seconds. And this is something where you have to find what you're passionate about and just be there and show up and be consistent. Consistency is what we need. We've talked about consistency in funding. We also need consistency in people. And it's nice to be able to call on somebody and know that we can have them help us if we need them. And the longer you build that relationship, the better it becomes. Someone in the undergrad program actually reached out to me, and she had interviewed me to see if she thought that the Leukemia Lymphoma Society would ever be a place that she would want to work. And I thought, wow, good for you, because it's good to get out there, and I will always remember who she is now. And I thought it was really smart to take it upon herself to see, do I want to work at a place like this, instead of getting into it, you know, maybe having to be somewhere for 6 months and then maybe not understanding, you know, that's going to work out for either side. So I thought it was, you know, we're talking about being creative, and that was a very creative way to be. So anyways, that's what I think. Just show up. Yeah.
No, that's great, and you're highlighting something that's very important for our sector, is not only giving back and volunteering, but putting a human face to the work that we do. Incredible. Thank you, Vanessa, for that. Matthew, we're talking about practical pieces of advice we could give to a student, to someone who is interested in getting their toes wet into the sector, perhaps even into your organization. So what advice would you give to that student?
Thanks, Nick. I love giving advice. I have several points that I wrote down. One is I work a lot with young people. So, young people, when they start a contract or start a job, they may feel like, I'm just on a contract or I'm just frontline, but I would take away the just, and I recommend for new hires and young grads to interact with all levels of the organizations. Nonprofit can be quite a flat sector where sometimes there's a small organization, there's 4 people working in the office. So, there's all of a sudden a huge network for you. And when you meet those people, you get to know them, you remember their name, like with the people in your work setting, that those people, if you remember their name, they'll remember your name. And that first work experience for you can be quite a growth opportunity. And maybe it's not within that exact organization, but like you say, Nick, Halifax is really small. So if they remember who you are and you're going for a job interview, oh, I know somebody over at that organization, I can put in a good word for you. So sort of that relationship building, I think, is very important in the sector. And that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Matthew. And you've elicited a student that would like to ask a question. Student of mine, Sarah Dobby, the floor is yours before I have one last question to wrap up our panel discussion.
This can actually kind of go to anybody, but it was called to my attention by the fact that he made reference to young grads and young students. And I may be a minority in the college environment, but I don't feel like it based on what I've seen of my classmates. But I'm in my 40s. I'm a single parent. I'm trying to juggle 3 kids, and I'm trying to juggle full-time work, and I'm trying to juggle full-time school. So what advice do you people have for somebody like me who is constantly being pressured to cram in some volunteer time in order to expand their network and find that opportunity to get themselves out there?
Any panelists want to jump in?
I apologize for the word young and that assumption, Sarah. Maybe I should have said new, or like returning to the workforce, which, the YMCA is often a first job for people, whether it's in the school or in community. And so I appreciate the juggling of having, responsibilities at home. And so the advice would go the same, that when you're in a new work environment, if you're finishing graduation, you're starting a short-term contract, if you're able to work 15 hours a week, that when you're in that 15 hours that, often in the nonprofit sector, that people will, treat you like a peer, and that you have experience and expertise and strengths to bring to your role from your personal experience or your education. So just building those positive relationships as you start new positions in the community sector.
If I could add one thing there too, I think it was Kristin that said the word or the term friend raiser. Anybody who is struggles to find extra time to volunteer. I really like that concept of, being a friend of the organization by word of mouth, encouraging other people to support the organization, and be that friend is also a great way. Getting to know an organization and promoting it through word of mouth or through social media or through your own connections is a good way as well.
I would also add that, Sarah, I feel like we live parallel lives. I'm a busy mom as well, but just finished a degree that was so-called full-time while running an organization. And I would argue that there are several different ways you can make a contribution, and not all of them are hugely time-consuming. Even if you can find an hour a week or even a couple hours a month, that for some is a very sizable contribution of time, particularly if it's, as Vanessa said, it's reliable and you can really call upon that person. The other thing is make sure it's in your wheelhouse. So it's an extension of something you're currently doing, and then it doesn't really feel very extra. Like it's not stimulating you as a new skill necessarily, though I recognize that for many, volunteering is a way to express another side of their skill sets. If you're really looking at being a bit more pragmatic about this, pick something that you can kind of put together. When I was doing my master's degree, some of my major projects were based on the organization I was working for, because it was really sensible in terms of time management. So I hope that's helpful, Sarah, and I wish you good luck.
Thank you, panelists, for jumping in, and that was a great question, Sarah. Thank you for raising that. Time is getting it's getting away from us. It's of the essence. So do forgive me for getting to this last question, only saving a little bit of time. But really briefly, and we'll start with Annika, can you tell us the types of jobs or opportunities that might be available to students who are considering a career with your organization, or perhaps getting involved in your organization?
Well, I am so new, and I will say that the organization with me is now 3 people, so put that in context. But I think that will change over time, and the kinds of opportunities, I think, you know, we're going to be looking for somebody in the communications realm. That's something that comes up all the time. We're going to be doing more around training and capacity building. So there's, you know, things like facilitation or research, or being able to host training sessions, hold gatherings, those kinds of things. A lot of the connecting people, like to your point about networks, like social media skills, communication skills, storytelling, etc.
Perfect. Excellent. Paula, opportunities that may exist in your organization, perhaps career sense, but also volunteer opportunities.
Well, if you can think it, you can do it, pretty much at Feed Nova Scotia. So we've got very tactile opportunities, from, you know, sorting food to assisting on driving a truck, or driving a truck if you have the right license. We have work in the office. We have, you know, reception, social media, communications, fundraising, policy, research, data entry, working with people on phones, helping support. Like it's broad, and helping us to work smarter. Sometimes that gets overlooked. People with expertise around IT, you know, around crunching data, helping us to use those tools to work smarter and not necessarily harder is always a big one.
Excellent, thank you. Vanessa, opportunities career-wise and volunteer-wise that exist in your organization for our students to get a little bit more exposure to the work that you do.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so I think for us, not right now, but we will be looking for a revenue-oriented person. And I think that can be scary coming out of the gate for a lot of people. I think in school we learn a lot about marketing and communications, and maybe we just drive ourselves in that avenue, but there are lots of aspects of my job that I get to do those things, but I also get the benefit of being able to meet so many incredible people that perhaps you find truly where you want to end up. So we will eventually be looking for a revenue person. We downsized quite a bit throughout this whole situation, and we have to figure out where we can exist for now, and then there will become a time, you know, I think for all of us probably, where that changes. But so for now, I think Paula made a very good point, like, let's work smarter. So we are struggling to do the little things, which are social media and that kind of thing, and that's what really brings our community to us. So speaking on consistency again, if we could have a volunteer that we could rely on consistently to do our social media, and this is, I mean, like a year consistency thing, that could potentially turn into something for somebody as well. So I think, you know, if you feel like you have a strength, just let us know what that is, and we're all pretty good at figuring out how you could fit.
No, I love this, and we're going to create some opportunities and connections here. So you're getting the students in real time from industry professionals and their organizations. Thank you, Vanessa. The YMCA, Matthew, what opportunities are there in your organization to volunteer and perhaps a career path?
We have lots of opportunities right now. The new Lindsay YMCA is open on South Park Street. The street is still closed. There's some construction going on, but the fitness center and community center is open. So we've hired a lot of staff for that location. YMCA Halifax Dartmouth has over 200 staff, so full and part-time. So we have employment opportunities with our after-school program in the schools, YPHD. We have Purdy's Wharf Childcare. We have the Immigrant Center here on Bears Road, where you can volunteer your time. We have volunteer basketball coaches, fitness instructors. There's quite a lot of volunteer opportunities. And like everyone's mentioned, that's a really good way to get your foot in the door and get known by some of the staff who could recommend you for employment opportunities. And in terms of where to find employment and volunteer opportunities, it's just at YMCA Halifax Dartmouth website.
Perfect. Thank you, Matthew. Beautiful facility, by the way. Congratulations, that is awesome. Kristen, the last bit of exposure goes to you, your organization, opportunities to give back, to volunteer, and perhaps a career with Junior Achievement in Nova Scotia.
Well, I really like what Vanessa said by almost sort of telling us what you can do, because that is, that's actually a very efficient way to show up with an organization. We recently, I hate the term, but we recently upskilled our staffing to meet our new delivery model. So we were looking for really different kind of folks. We actually just did 2 major hires, which was significant for us. So I don't think we'll be hiring in the near future again, but as we can grow back and increase our resources, we will be. We don't have any frontline staff. All of our frontline services are actually delivered by volunteers. So in typical times, we have upwards of 900 volunteers engaged on a yearly basis to deliver our programs, and it's not a huge commitment. At this point, we've actually right-sized that commitment to be no more than a half an hour. So if you're looking for an opportunity to help us deliver a program, we would love to have you. And it's a great resume builder, and it's a great experience, and it's not a lot of time. So thank you if you do.
No, that is great, and I hope students are able to take some of us up on these offers. The offer is there, and this is awesome. So it's sad because our discussion has to come to a conclusion now, but I want to thank once more on behalf of the Department of Business and Tourism here at Mount St. Vincent University. I want to thank each of our panelists, Annika, Paula, Vanessa, Matthew, and Kristin. Thank you for joining us. And for students who are interested, that this discussion will be uploaded to our Department of Tourism, Business and Tourism YouTube channel within the next couple of days for you to consume this in the future as well. Don't be afraid to reach out to any panelist, connect on LinkedIn, on social media. If you are interested and I can be of any assistance, or one of our faculty can, our department, we would love to make that connection. But with that, I wish everybody a happy day and stay healthy, be safe. And thank you once again. Take care, everybody.